Hey, Michael J.
So I was thinking about stomping people, like stomping them, but like also adding, I don't know, a black splash. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, people have been doing the black splash for a little while in Historic for these mono green decks, mostly mono green, in order to be splashing Rotting Regisaur into these the type of decks that are like Steel Leaf Championing and Ronus the Indomitable, and they're just like hitting hard, right? But the addition of Egon, God of Death, has been kind of a interesting innovation that's added, it's brought them to kind of a critical mass where you can actually just play Collected Company in the mono green decks. They're still playing the Llanowar Elf type stuff, but they got so many threes because of the ability to get extra out of like Kazandu Mammoth and Egon, God of Death, that now Collected Company actually works here. And then, of course, it's always appealing splashing black for sideboard removal or Thoughtseize.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all that stuff is true. Like, one of the big vulnerabilities with any monocolored deck is that you have a potentially inflexible sideboard, and green is probably the worst of the monocolored decks from that perspective. But that's not the situation we have here. We have a black splash. First of all, I just always loved kind of the Rotting Regisaur addition to the green StOmPy deck in Historic.
Particularly with Great Henge, right?
Oh yeah, that's really why. You know the reason. Just like it's peanut butter and chocolate on that one. Even better than some of its normal playmates or Steel Leaf Champion, which is also great. It is just down to 2 pips at that point. I love Egon, God of Death, in this archetype because if all else fails, you can slow cycle it for 3.
There's some fun synergies here. It's more than meets the eye. Obviously, Egon is like making the Great Henge a lot cheaper, right? And he just generally, gets in there and hits pretty hard. But if first of all, if you've got Egon, God of Death, powering out the Great Henge gives you enough fuel that you're more likely to be able to continue to pay for Egon, particularly given that Rotting Regisaur's discard can actually pay for Egon halfway.
Yeah, I love that synergy between Rotting Regisaur and Egon. But I do think it's kind of weird. Like, the Great Henge puts cards in your hand, and Egon wants to eat cards out of your graveyard. So I guess, like, the Great Henge...
Well, you're just playing so many cards that your opponent either has to react or they're going to die anyway. So you just have enough material,
Maybe I could just get 2 Rotting Regisaurs in play, and then I'm always all good.
Another nice thing is it helps your stepping all the way up, right? Like, you got this Pelt Collector, and you give it, you play your Scavenging Ooze into Kazandu Mammoth, you got to keep going. And eventually, you're going to hit that 5, 6, 7 of Steel Leaf Champion, Egon, and Rotting Regisaur.
Oh, hell yeah, you are.
But yeah, Egon, God of Death, also powers up your Ronus the Indomitable. Another way to make sure that Ronus is getting in there. And Ronus's +2/+0 and Trample is actually awesome on Egon because of the Death Touch. Obviously, Death Touch doesn't come up that often on 6/6. But when you give him +2/+0 and Trample, woo, boy.
Oh, that's very nice. That's like, they always take 7? Is that right?
Well, it depends. They can throw like 3 things in front of it and only take 5.
Yeah, that's not good for them. Patrick, talk to me about, like, this is kind of weird, like, just from a deck construction standpoint. So you got Scavenging Ooze, which is a good man, right? Like, there are a lot of StOmPy decks where Scavenging Ooze is just literally the best card. And you got Egon, and they're both very hungry for graveyard, right? So Scavenging Ooze could be potentially hungry for the opponent's graveyard, but they're both hungry for graveyard. But what about Throne of Death, the opposite number to Egon, God of Death? Does this come up at all? Like, are you ever?
Yeah, not very often, but it's in attrition situations, and it's actually more common after sideboarding. But it's a plan against if you're playing against like a removal heavy deck. Throne of Death is not the worst for grinding. the mill part doesn't really matter, but it's the occasionally you do get to hit Resilient Kenra. That's kind of hilarious. But mostly you just, if you're in Throne of Death mode, which you're usually not, but if you are, you're just going to be toming.
I guess you have 2 Egons. You can play second Egon as Throne of Death.
You
pair that with a Rotting Regisaur, and you're all good.
No, dude, you play the Throne of Death on turn 5, and you got 3 creatures in your 2 creatures in your graveyard or whatever, and you just start drawing cards. Like, once your opponent's just playing like lots of terminates and stuff, you know.
Yeah, I just want Egon to live, man. Although it's cool if he doesn't live. That's a really great kind of fail-state on Egon. I wasn't kidding. Like, I am the kind of person who cycled a lot of Akroma's Vengeances for 3. And Egon's just totally got that mode.
But like, okay, so let's say you're against if you're against like one of these blue-white control decks, like the Azorius control deck that Ninja played, right? So you're already trying to deal with somebody who's countering so many of your cards with Censor and Saw It Coming and Disdainful Stroke and all this stuff, right? And then they're sweeping the board with Doomscar and Wrath of God. And obviously, some amount of the time, you're going to be in spots where Shark Typhoon trades with something, right? But like,
trades in quotes. I mean,
yeah,
look, that thing is going to beat us up.
But like, even Baffling End, which seems like it's like, okay, it exiles it, so why is that? Like, why is the throne good against it? Well, because the Baffling End costs a card out of their hand and a couple mana, right? And if you can like keep playing more and more threats like every turn, 1-for-1 removal is not the way to beat that, you know? And this is a deck that actually, you know, like some blue-white control decks in some formats are more are better equipped to being able to deal with problematic permanents. This deck has to really lean on Teferi. Other than that, it's got 1 commit memory and 1 cast out, right?
Yeah. I think, like, it's very well set up against creatures, right? With, like, not 1-for-1 in creatures, right? Like, Doomscar and Wrath of God can take multiple bodies down all at the same time. But, you know, if your opponent's got the Throne or the Great Henge, I think that the reaction is a bit limited in game 1. You're just going to probably overwhelm their... maybe at least keep pace with their Teferi, if not overwhelm.
I mean, and they obviously don't always have it, and you try to go after it with your attacking, right? But the point is that lots of times you're going to be in a spot where you can just play a threat. Like, you just play a Regisaur, or they counter it, and then you just play a land and a Throne. And now you can, like... if they hold permission up, you can take that opportunity to draw an extra card.
I also I like that because it gives you something extra to do with your mana. Like, one of the things that's dangerous for those StOmPy type decks is Flood. And, you know, they don't have a great way to regulate their draws. I mean, I guess you can just play Collected Company or something. But, you know, if you have too much land, you have the ability to activate Throne and then play whatever you drew with it. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your deck's pretty low to the ground. And you also can do some of the nice action where you're playing Collected Company on their end step, and then untapping and playing another threat on your turn.
The classic.
But yeah, I think this would be the kind of deck that you might... I mean, obviously you're trying to play Egon, but like it's nice to have options, you know. There's a little bit different of a Collected Company deck that I thought was kind of interesting, and I'm wondering your thoughts on whether this is the real deal or a meme. So Historic Angels, but with so it's like Abzan Angels, but built around Collected Company and Vito Thorn of the Dusk Rose. So your Angel action, you've got fantastic 2-drop Angel enablers with Bishop of Wings and the new Kaldheim Youthful Valkyrie, and you're also playing a little bit of a life deck, but like it's not like a Leonin Pride Mate type of situation. You're using Soul Warden and Bishop of Wings along with Resplendent Angel, which gets powered up by the life gain, but also can be a source of life gain. And then Angel of Vitality, which can buff your life gain and get benefit out of the life gain. But the big part is you're really trying to lean on this Righteous Valkyrie, which gives you a ton of extra life and a huge payoff for gaining some extra life.
I don't think this is a meme deck at all. I don't know. Like, I've always wanted Bishop of Wings to be fantastic, and this looks like a good spot for it.
Speaker of the Heavens is kind of sweet here, right?
Like,
it's very doable to gain 7 life in a turn.
Yeah, it's hard to... I think, like, some of the cards that are the weirdest are, like, Soul Warden, right? And Soul Warden's obviously exactly at home in a deck with 30 creatures that you can cast, etc., etc. But it's, like, weirdly off-theme compared to some of the other cards.
I don't know. It gives you a lot of life, right? Like, you get double life out of it with the Angel of Vitality. And it is a cleric, so you get that bonus 1 extra life with the Righteous Valkyrie. And really, you want to have a lot of life gain triggers, because you do have your Ajani's Pride Mate action a little bit from your Ajani Strength of the Pride. But a part of it is that you're a Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose deck.
So Veto is the only black card in this deck?
Yeah, in the main deck, yep.
How about in the sideboard? Are there any black cards in the sideboard?
No, I guess not in this particular build. Some of the time they play Thoughtseize, but yeah, this one, no.
I think that if I were capable of hitting a double black on a BB3, I'd probably invest in some removal in the sideboard or Thoughtseize. But so I guess the thought here is Veto is 2 and a B for a 1/3 Vampire Cleric, right? So nothing to write home about. Doesn't even naturally have lifelink, right? You have to pay the 5 mana to give it and others lifelink. But
that doesn't come up very often in this deck.
But because it has the other clause, whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. All these Soul Wardens and everybody else who are gaining life, you know, your triggers off of Ajani Strength of the Pride's +1, etc., just turns Veto into a machine gun. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is a meme at all. Like, I could totally imagine having, like, 1 or more Soul Warden or Soul Warden type proxy cards in play, casting Collected Company, flipping over Veto in another body, maybe getting some sort of token triggers along the way, and just rocking and rolling. I think the thing is, it puts the opponent on a different kind of pressure than a deck that just has kind of 30 creatures and 4 Collected Companies normally does. And it is also cool, right? Like, I think that the fun factor here is a non-zero. But setting that aside, this looks like a real deck to me.
Do you think 7 black is enough? You're really hoping to collect the company into that Veto.
What is enough, right? I think, like, if I reliably wanted to cast Veto on turn 3, I would be more in the neighborhood of 12 black.
Actually, this one only has 6, but what I wonder is, I mean, maybe you just want to have this many planes so that your Sun Petal Grove is untapped even more. But when you have 4 Temple Gardens, 4 Godless Shrines, and 8 planes, that's 16 planes and a forest to untap your Sun Petal Grove. Can we really not just change a couple of some of these planes into some pathways?
Yeah, I'm thinking pathways is where I'd go. I think it's also a little thin on isolated chapels, right? Like,
sure.
Can't you invest in 4 isolated chapels? There are a lot of planes.
But yeah, I think this deck is a really cool deck.
What do you need a forest for?
What do you need a forest for?
Yeah.
To cast your green cards.
There's 1 green card in the main deck, and there's no way to search for the forest.
Well, there is a way to search for the forest. If your opponent Field of Ruins you.
Yeah, but what are there's like no strategic lands in this deck.
But people play Field of Ruin. But my point is that if they Field of Ruin your Sun Petal Grove.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's worth it. I'm just saying that's why the kids do it.
I'm telling you, I'm I'm all about Singleton Basic Lance. And I'm saying I don't think I would play a Forest in this deck. I think I would rather max out my duels. I mean, I would go so far as to... I mean, I would just play way more pathways. Like we were talking about Li Shichan's cycling deck last week, and that deck is traditionally just red and white. And the version that's out there right now in Standard is just chock full of pathways because why not? I think that there are enough planes here that you can support at least one more pathway or isolated chapel instead of that Forest. Play a green pathway. I'm good with it.
So what do you think of the return of Jund? So a couple key additions from Kaldheim have helped power up like Jund. Not just the color combination Jund, but actual like Jund. So you've got instead of like Bloodbraid Elf, you've got a Seeker's Chariot and Bone Crusher Giant. And those are some pretty good. Those are some pretty good folks. Stuff like Maelstrom Pulse and Thoughtseize is exactly what you'd expect. And Bloodchief's Thirst fits your MO. Inscription of Ruin is kind of interesting. Wanted to see your thoughts on that. And then the use of you called it Saruf Realm Eater. You were saying that you thought in slightly more powerful formats, like I doubted this guy in Standard, but you said in slightly more powerful formats, you thought that this guy might actually have a chance.
Yeah.
And here we see it in action as as kind of like a tool for helping control the board, and alongside Valky and the somewhat exotic choice of Chevelle Bane of Monsters.
Yeah, I cannot get behind Chevelle Bane of Monsters. I don't know. It just seems... I mean, I guess 1/3 Death Touch for 2 is, like, pretty cool. I mean, it's fine for what you're paying in the mana. And then it's got, like, its whole, like, play pattern of the next however many turns, we're just going to start doing stuff to try to get card advantage. But I'm not into it. I don't think that is where you want to be if you want to Jund it up. Also, I'm not a big fan of Inscription of Ruin. It's a little expensive for what you get, don't you think?
I mean, you do get to Inscription of Ruin your Valky God of Lies, right? No, don't get any fancy ideas. I just mean that it's like a good card.
Yeah,
like you've got Scavenging Ooze, Valky, Chevelle, and maybe that's part of why you got Chevelle here is that you're just trying to have a critical mass of twos that are like impactful. So, but I can't help but wonder if you can do better.
Like I think of Jund on one of 3 axes, right? There's like been different characters of Jund over the course of Standard and then other formats like Modern. I mean, Jund is in and out of being a legacy staple also, right? So I think it's one of 3 things. One, it can be the most powerful deck in the format. So we've seen Jund decks that were top-ending Broodmate Dragon, and everything under Broodmate Dragon was some kind of 2-for-1 with Black Lotus thrown in, and you could get a bunch of them, right? You could Bituminous Blast people, you could Lightning people, you could Bloodbraid Elf people, and like that deck is just very high on raw power, right? So if it's the second most powerful deck in the format, that's probably not a good version of Jund, right? But it's a very good, most powerful deck in the format. Then you have the Jund, I think, that is, whether or not Bloodbraid Elf had happened to have been legal in formats that otherwise should have had Bloodbraid Elf, is just a relentless combination of cards that every single thing that you're ripping is on the order here of Nasika's Chariot, of Vraska Golgari Queen, a Bone Crusher Giant, right? You're just eking out maximum ability to grind people out every single time you draw a card. And on top of that, you have a high amount of flexibility. Like almost every card that you pick up does 3 different things, 2 of them really well, right? And I think that this deck is closest to that version, and it has too many edges it needs to stand off. And then third, I think, is like the Jund that puts pressure on you, right? Like we've seen various versions of this.
Yeah, this is definitely this is more the And I think Inscription of Ruin is aspiring to be the Blightning of that middle option, you know?
Yeah, but the problem is any of those identities of Jund have to have a niche. Like I think like that first Jund is a very bad second most powerful deck. It's a very good first most powerful deck. But like if you're in a universe where people are like Uganing or Trawning or something, you don't want to be that deck. They're like probably faster than you, and they just, you know, spit all over your investments. You need to then be that kind of middle Jund. And the thing that Jund requires is to have cards that are just really powerful and flexible. And I just like, I don't know. I think that there's just too many cards that are like, you can't get away with this much mana for this effect.
So, what do you think of Jegantha the Wellspring? Is it just sort of yeah, it's free? Or is it actually just doing some important work, given how much it straight ramps you into Tybalt Cosmic Imposter?
That is a cool thing to be able to do, but I don't think that comes up that much, right?
Really? You draw Jegantha every game.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, like, man. That sounds like that's going to come up to me.
Like, so you already drew Valky God of Lies, and your new plan is to, like, play Jegantha on turn 5?
Yeah, and in particular, if you're playing against somebody that isn't, like, you know, if somebody just plays a blue-white tap land on turn 1, you're not necessarily just, like, slam Valky on 2, right?
Well, no, but you also, like, just being in a position where you're going to tap out for Jegantha on turn 5 and then, like, attempt to play the Cosmic Imposter. I feel like if they played a blue-white tap land on turn 1, you have to kind of wonder if you're going to get caught by a censor, if that's going to be your play. Like, those guys play a lot of censors, and if they don't have a censor, they just, like, they will be very happy to reveal the card that they had face down. Like, they're like, I know you were wondering what it was. You're not going to like this one.
As far as Blightnings go, what do you think of the Cyborg Davriel Rogue Shadow Mage? It's something we've seen in formats gone by, but here we see a return of it, helping, I guess, your anti-control plan.
I really like that card. I think it's quite underrated.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I think it's if you want to do the thing that's on this, it does it for you, and it can just do a little. It just do a little along the way. You don't ever have to take off the third counter if you don't want to, when you can, and it's a contained 3-for-1. It's very convenient, also, right? So like you play it, you get the first shot out of it if you want, right? It can kind of sit there. You can you can't really gain value, but you can do other things, right? Like if, say for sake of argument, they have 2 cards and you have Davriel in play with like 1 or 2 counters on it, you can Thoughtseize them first and then decide if you want to use the last ability. Like it's very nice that its discard doesn't require you to use any mana.
So do you like that this style of Jund less or more, I suppose, than something like the Rakdos Sacrifice stuff? Like the newest versions of Rakdos Sacrifice have kind of taken their cue from the more powered formats banning of Dreadhorde Arcanist and actually adopting Dreadhorde Arcanist for some Rakdos Arcanist action with it's you know the spell stuff. You're like, okay, Village Rites and the Claim the Firstborn, that makes sense to me, you know, and Lurrus of the Dream Den as your companion, of course, sure, this all sounds good. But then it gets a little interesting. You're like, okay, well, Thoughtseize is a big power upgrade, right? But, like, Dreadhorde Arcanist just seems incredible in this deck. And then when your enablers are Stitcher's Supplier and Young Pyromancer, that's, like, a lot better of creatures than you had access to in Standard, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to compare these two decks straight up, like the Dreadhorde Arcanist, Lurrus of the Dream Den type deck against the Jund deck that we were just looking at, like, I feel like this is just such a better option if I only had to choose between those two decks. Like, first of all, this Dreadhorde Arcanist deck has, like, a decent amount of defensive flexibility. It's playing cards like Fatal Push and Bedevil.
Or Harvest.
Like, it's got a bunch of that stuff going on. Second of all, this deck is also a Thoughtseize deck, so that's not different. They're both Thoughtseize deck. this is a way better Thoughtseize deck because it has Dreadhorde Arcanist. Right? Like,
well, the Dreadhorde Arcanist has extra value in this deck because of the use of 4 Claim Fame. So the Claim Fame, first of all, obviously, for 1 mana, you can just get back your Dreadhorde Arcanist, and that's great, right? Second of all, your Dreadhorde Arcanist can potentially play Claim Fame, but what's kind of sweet is that you can actually use the Claim to get back the Arcanist and then use Fame to make the Arcanist attack immediately. And then you get to just play your Thoughtseize out of your graveyard. You go turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Arcanist. Even if they kill it, you go turn 3 Claim Fame.
Yeah, like what if you had a young Pyromancer in play when you did all that? And then you ask yourself, why don't I play 4 of this card? Like, it's really good.
Yeah, I would play a 4th Pyromancer instead of Valky, I think. But, I mean, Valky's a great card, so you can't fault somebody too much.
I can totally get behind playing Valky. I just feel like there's something in this 75 that is not as good as the 4th young Pyromancer. For sure. Like, just look at, like, all, like, the random, Spark Harvests and, like, Fatal Pushes, like, Spike Field Hazards. There's, like, just so many different ways that you can get a little value on young Pyromancer here. And then speaking of Blightning, so we were talking about, the attempted Blightning in that Jund deck. Is there a better Blightning than Kroxa?
Kroxa's got a lot of Blightning, particularly when you're so often going to be able to get it for free. Stitcher's Supplier is a fantastic enabler for Kroxa, particularly when you can sack the Supplier to Village Rites, and you're just like all the way up.
I was thinking the exact same thing. But then also you can... But dude, also, you know who loves to be famed is Kroxa. You do got to work a little bit because it's not like you just always have 6 mana lying around, but you can make it happen sometimes, right? Yeah. So for me, all that matters is that 2 things: 1, it's in the range; 2, that it's in the range, right?
And it doesn't take any cards in your hand. That's part of the beauty of it.
Oh, that's
You're
awesome.
Milling into both the Fame and the Kroxa. So you've got this weird inevitability that doesn't even take drawing either one.
Like, Stitcher's Supplier and Kroxa were never in Standard together, were they?
No.
Yeah, we would have known if they were, I think.
Well, at least I would have. But
yeah, dude, this wouldn't have been the first time. You kind of saw one of them throwing the other one across the red zone straight into the opponent's jaw.
And then I've always liked the Lurrus decks having access to little Agadim's Awakening action. If you can Agadim's Awakening, this deck's got unbelievable 1s and 2s, right? Stitcher's Supplier and then the Arcanist or the Pyromancer. But then the fact that you have Lurrus as well, you just have so much ability to out-card advantage even the 2-for-1 Jund decks.
Yeah.
So I'm a buyer of this new style of Rakdos Sacrifice.
Yeah. Again, if you were just going to ask me, you got to pick this one or this one, I get that the other deck has more expensive cards or theoretically a higher ceiling, but functionally, this deck has a lot of 2-for-1 to it. It doesn't look like it does necessarily, but it functionally does because of the Arcanist, because so many of its cards are just compounded value. This is actually kind of what I was talking about before. When your creatures are Stitcher's Supplier and Young Pyromancer, it just implies that you're getting more action than you would normally get from a 1-1-for-1, right? Or a 2-1-for-2. That Young Pyromancer is going to give you a lot of, bodies, blocking, something that you can sacrifice for some value. There's Village Rites aplenty. How gross is it? You use Village Rites with Young Pyromancer in play, sacrificing one of Young Pyromancer's proteges, and then, just get another one by casting the Village Rites. That's a perverse incentive if you're the Village Rites.
There are some kind of more niche decks that I thought were kind of interesting. The Killadub's Flash deck made me think of you. This, kind of a proposed blue-green list That's like it's got, it's that frilled mystic night pack ambusher type of blue green, but then it's packing the torrential Gearhulk Sublime Epiphany sort of big plan.
Yeah.
And then the couple, Growth Spiral, obviously super on plan. Rewind kind of gets an eyebrow raise, but I get it. Sinister Sabotage is a little bit surprising to me as the 3-cost counterspell of choice. And I don't know what to make of Warrant Warden, man.
So, with the exception of Growth Spiral, which is obviously just flash ban that card as soon as you see it, this deck does lack some of the oomph that was in the standard version. Like, it just doesn't have that much more acceleration beyond the Growth Spiral. But I think that, like if there was a party going on and you had, like, Frilled Mystic and Nightpack Ambusher were, like, around a card table saying, like, oh, we're having a good time, and Torrential Gearhulk came up and just like, hey, guys, I know you don't know me. I'm from another block. And they were like, shut up. We've heard of you. Grab a chair, man. Like, Torrential Gearhulk is just way, way, way on plan here. I think that the primary awesome thing about this deck is that if you got what you want going and it's turn 6 and they haven't gotten you yet, they're probably not going to get you. The thing that I don't like about this is even worse than the standard deck in that if you start to fall behind, I don't see how you catch up.
Dude, you warrant you go ahead and warrant their threat. That's the plan, man.
Yeah. Okay.
And then counter it, then hit it with like a quench or something. It's like an extra
2 mana temporary 1-for-1. Like, I mean, we're talking about decks that have like insane engines and stuff. Yeah, I have 2 copies of Warrant Warden. Surely I'll get back in this game.
Dude, you haven't lived until you've Sinister Sabotaged, saw that you have the Sublime Epiphany on top of your deck. Go, hell no, surveil it to the graveyard, and then get them good with the Gearhulk.
I love, again, it's in the range. Now that you've said that out loud, I know that it's in the range. Now have you ruined my entire experience, because that's all I'm going to be trying to do with my life. That's too cool. I was actually going to say, I played Sinister Sabotage it's not even last year at this point, Patrick. How depressing is that? Like a year and change ago when I won that PCQ with Simic Flash. But I think that if we're talking about a bigger format, I think there's some other options I might want to go for instead of Sinister Sabotage at the 3. Like I would consider playing more Censors. Like the 3 is like the least exciting casting cost for counter spells. I understand this is a hard counter. I would consider the new one. Saw It Coming. I think that one's pretty cool. Although I guess there's not much bluff to it.
I don't think I would be in for Saw It Coming unless you just were like really, really, really into the draw spell. But I don't know.
The Sublime Epiphany thing is fine. Exciting. I
definitely. But you know what else is exciting, dude? Playing Captain Sissy alongside the Mox Amber and Kolvari, God of Kinship. But you can just play a Legends deck, man. A Sika, God of the Tree. So this Paradox Engine deck, Golden Paradox by Brewer's Kitchen, not exactly a tested deck, but man, when I see the look of this thing, So, first of all, obviously, if you're just playing like lots of different Legends, Captain Sisse puts in some serious work. Being able to go get your Paradox Engine means you don't have to play as many. Having 1 copy of Chromatic Orrery is a powerful endgame plan, particularly when you can go get Golos with Captain Sissy. And the ability to go get your 1 Kolvari and to get your 1 Kenrith, the Return King, I mean, this is really a Captain Sissy deck. And you even have Emery Lurker the Lock to help find your Paradox Engine and Mox Amber Chromatic Orrery action. But then you've also got this big plan of Urza's Ruinous Blasts and Karn's Temporal Sundering.
Well, so first off, I'm happy that someone wants to make Captain Sisay a thing. That card was first printed more than 21 years ago, I think. And if she gets a day in the sun right now, I would be very happy for that. But I think like the bar on a 2/2 for 4, I guess it's challenging, but maybe it's going on here. There's so many outlets.
Pay red with Kenrith. Give her haste.
Yeah, that's really the thing. That's like the difference between a Solemn Simulacrum, which is also a 2/2 for 4, that everyone's like, yeah, this card's fantastic.
But this isn't just grinding, right? Like, this is the engine. You're trying to Captain Sisay with Paradox Engine.
Yeah, but
once you have the Paradox Engine, you can cast Captain, or you can use Captain Sisay to go get your Mox Amber, play the Mox Amber, and then untap your Sisay, go get a Mox Amber, tap your one Mox Amber, go get another Mox Amber, tap your Mox Amber, go get another Mox Amber, and you can do this a lot, right? And then you go get your Emery Lurker of the Lock, and then you Emery, and when you play your Emery, you get to untap your Mox Amber, and then your Emery gets back Mox Amber, and then you just go off. You get to draw your whole deck.
But the Captain Sisay, like, it's not just that she has to survive a turn. Right? Like, all the decks that we've looked at so far have cards like Bone Crusher Giant. It's not just that. It's that, like, even the explosive, I got my whole engine going package, like, still requires her to untap more than once. Right?
No, not necessarily. I mean, you have to untap more than once because you have a Paradox Engine, but you don't necessarily need to untap more than one.
So if you go like Captain Sisay, go get Paradox Engine, you already have a Mox, right?
Well, no, but the other example, though, is that you can just Captain Sisay and go get Karn's Temporal Sundering over and over again.
Oh, that card is very, very...
Like, you don't have to... If you ever untap with Captain Sisay, you are in an unbelievably dominating position. Well, you can just take 3 extra turns in a row, to say nothing of whatever else you might be doing. And that's not even counting the card's Temporal Sunderings letting you bounce everything.
All right, I'm sold.
Remember,
no. I just want to untap with Captain Sisay now. This is replaced.
And if you get Chromatic Orrery out at the same time as Paradox Engine, holy moly, right? And that's not even speaking to the Kinnan Bonder Prodigy action or gold. The problem I see with this deck is that you've got like 20-something ways to just Temporal Aperture. Like, it's like your deck has the Prismatic Bridge, and you've got Emery Lurker of Lock, and you've got Captain Sisay, and you've got Kinnan, and you've got Kenrith, and you've got Kolvari, and you've got the Chromatic Order. It's unbelievable how many over-the-top plans. I think you've got several. You've got a number of too many over-the-top plans. Why can't we play with any interaction at all? And if we're not going to play interaction, why don't we play a lot more ramp?
Urza's Ruinous Blast is some good interaction, right? Like, all of your permanents
it's a little slow.
Are legendary.
Yeah, it's a little slow, right? But, like, it doesn't really stop somebody who's interacting in any zone besides the battlefield.
Or what if they had legendary permanents they were attacking you with?
So, I don't know, man. Maybe this deck just capitalizes on the fact that that people are playing fair, but I'm a little concerned about somebody else playing an unfair deck. However, I think this is a really, really cool concept from the Brewer's Kitchen. I think this is a pretty raw form, but I'm going to be interested to see what it looks like when it gets a little bit more developed.
Yeah, you know? I think you might be right. Like, so this is just like buying some hella GameStop stock, right? Like, because Captain Sisay is high risk, but once you untap with it,
I don't know though. I'm not totally sure. I mean, I guess you do go to the moon if you ever untap with Sisay, but I don't know, man. I just like the deck. I do think that it's not the only Paradox Engine deck, though, worth taking a look at. A slightly more traditional, if you could even call it that, but the Teamer Paradox deck by Mountain Goat is a little bit further along and a little bit more traditional. It's much heavier on the Emery, Lurker of Locke, Tameo, Kinnan, Bonder, Prodigy aspect, but it gives up almost every other big aspect of the deck besides Mox Amber and Paradox Engine. And then you've got a Karn the Great Creator package, but it's kind of like a little bit lighter of one than we sometimes see. And you've got Escape to the Wilds as part of your big plan. And then you've got the I guess Psy Master Thopterist additional angle. But the big thing is kind of splitting the Karn Great Creator Fae of Wishes action. So you do have a little bit more mileage out of that kind of unusual sideboard.
What do you think about that? Like, but there's pressure being put on the sideboard from both of those cards.
Well, I mean, a lot of them have overlap. Like Fae of Wishes and Karn are both targeting that Paradox Engine.
Yeah. What do you think about?
Well, you're also trying to set up the full combo, right?
Yeah,
like if you get Portal Sanctuary, you can kind of Portal Sanctuary with Paradox Engine, you can go off.
What do you think about just playing more Fae of Wishes then? Right, like Fae of Wishes is a more flexible card than
I don't know though, man. Like Karn is like, it's kind of, first of all, it's kind of sweet to just go get 2. Second of all, you got to like win the mirror match, man. And if you got Karn, your opponent can't tap their Mox Amber.
Oh, I guess Karn has additional attacks. That is kind of a big deal.
So I don't know, man. I do like the mixture, but it might be a little fancy. How much, like, do you think that you're getting enough mileage out of the Ancestral Statue in the sideboard? You can't get Ancestral Statue with Fae of Wishes, so it's just for the 2 copies of Karn. And then it lets you combo, right? Like, you can get into a spot where as long as your Paradox Engine is netting you enough mana to pay for the statue, you can just bounce the statue over and over and over again. Right? Like the statue can bounce itself and you can just go pure infinite. But like, do you need to do it that way? Like,
no, I mean, I think if you have
Sanctuary. So like, why not just do the Portal of Sanctuary? I mean, it's very slightly, it's very slightly harder to set up, but like both your cards get it.
Well, I was just thinking like, having more ways to do stuff is sometimes good, right? Like, especially if you can like set up things that are very different from each other via tutors, right? Like, I don't know if this is extensible to this example, right? But I just remember playing against that deck that was, make a 20/20 with my Vampire Hexmage, but also have Thopter Sword combo. I just like had all my bounce spells that I sided in. I'm like, oh, you're never going to get me with your 20/20, and they just beat me with the Thopter side. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just do the other thing, and that might be helpful.
This is also a deck that really does make a lot out of Aetherflux Reservoir. Like, Aetherflux Reservoir is not just your primary kill condition. It's like a powerful, like you can like really do it. Not just infinite, but sometimes you just go pretty big because if you ever get Emery plus Paradox Engine going, you don't even need to be infinite. It doesn't take that long before you just Aetherflux Reservoir them into next Tuesday. And that's to say nothing of how much sometimes you just really like gaining a boatload of life.
Yeah, big enough is good enough, right? It's like whatever big enough at the table is good enough, I think.
Yeah,
this has got to be like the best Kinnan Bonder Prodigy deck ever, right? Like we were just looking at a Kinnan Bonder Prodigy deck.
Maybe at this level of historic, I mean, Kinnan Bonder Prodigy's been in some pretty sweet decks if you go powerful. But,
yeah, I wasn't a believer initially. I don't know if you remember, and this one really slaps me in the face because it's been so much better than I thought it would be.
So what do you think of the two Collected Company Bant decks? There's Bant Angels and Bant Party. The Bant Angels deck is kind of like, I guess, the baseline. It's similar to the deck we talked about before, the whole Soul Warden, Speaker of the Heavens, all that action. But instead of the Veto Splash, you're splashing. You're picking up Linvala, Shield of Seagate. That's kind of that's already kind of interesting. And you can pull it together. But you're not really maximizing the party action as much because you're very much an angel deck, not a party deck. But you are a deck that is interested in making all of your creatures hexproof or indestructible until end of turn on specific occasions.
Yeah, this is one of those decks that I think its primary way to be beaten is by having its creatures losing, to a sweeper or sometimes in combat, right? So that ability on Linvala is very valuable.
Now, by contrast, the other Bant party deck that uses the Linvala Shield of Seagate, instead of the Angel plan, it's just full-on party. So it's trying to not only get Linvala to make your party full, but it's using Archpriest of Iona.
So before we just jump into the more party version, I think just assessing that the Angels with blue instead of black, I think that Veto is just better in terms of what you're getting from a synergy standpoint. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, Linvala is another angel.
Yeah, but I mean, you got plenty of angels, right? Okay,
I don't know. That ability seems very attractive to me.
Yeah, but Veto can just kill them, right? Because you can deal a lot of pressure to people. A lot of your guys already fly. You don't need.
I guess Veto is a cleric, so you're kind of halfway there.
You don't need to do 20 with Veto, right? 5 with Veto might be fantastic. You're
often going to do 7. So
Archpriest of Iona is a very, obviously in the right deck is just a very Tarmogoyfy little guy. I think you can start early and you get a lot out of Collected Company. And then you have all the other just good cards, right? Tajuru Paragon is a very nice follow up to Archpriest of Iona. You don't need the company going. You don't need some of the other synergies. It's just nice that they're all there together.
I mean, the Concerted Defense gets pretty darn good in this deck, right? That's one of the big draws.
Yeah, I mean, that's, really
you basically are getting
powerful.
Negate for 1 mana.
What do you think about Deputy of Detention here? So it's a Vidalcan Wizard, right? 1/3. A huge favorite in Standard back in the day. And I guess it's a pretty good hit on Collected Company.
Yeah. I mean, it's always interesting when you see stuff like this instead of, the Skyclave Apparition.
Yeah.
Which has been so, the standard for so long. And I always wonder where you're supposed to draw the line on, are you getting enough out of it being a wizard? Probably. I think so. I think once you're a believer in Archpriest of Iona and Concerted Defense, the reason I'm I guess a little hesitant is just is it really helping you at the right times, where you actually need, because one of the big payoffs for playing party is that you get to play with Linvala Shield of Seagate and make the you get the full party action where you can be like detaining something with Linvala, but she's already a wizard in the first place. So you're not actually, your deputy detention isn't even adding to the party for her either.
Counterpoint, deputy detention without synergies, without being hit by collected company, just being cast on time, can target a wide variety of potential opponent threats. And
that's true. The fact that it can sweep tokens is kind of a particularly appealing right now.
Yeah, it's just like, also, as silly as this might sound, it's not a particularly removal-intensive format, right? If people are playing, like, Bone Crusher Giant as their primary removal, Deputy Detention's third toughness is not nothing. Like, it's just like, kind of got you, bro.
True. So, what do you think, man?
I like...
Where would you be at?
I like that veto deck. I gotta say, I wasn't a little... I really warmed up to it over the course of our conversation today. I think it has a high ceiling. That is the deck of my heart this week. But the deck of my cruel, cruel mind is the Dreadhorde Arcanist deck. So,
out of decks we actually talked about, I like the Arcanist deck. But I think you're going to have to go ahead and put me down for Mono Red. Like MTG Joe's Mono Red deck with Burning Tree Emissary and Robber the Rich, Rampaging Frostodon, Fervent Champion, Embercleave. I know you're not a big red guy these days, but, being able to use Ramen Up Ruins alongside Faceless Haven is a lot of appeal to me. Getting Hazoret and Rampaging Frostodon back in the rotation, it's kind of just refreshing. I mean, it's unfortunate that your burn mostly sucks, but, like, at least you have Bone Crusher Giant, and Frostbite's not bad in the format. I'm in for C Mono Red. Okay, put me down for Rakdos Sacrifice.
All right, I will. Rakdos it is.
See you next week, dude.
Bye, Patrick.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, it's a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Yokora trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to fight